All right, our top focus this hour. A recent NHRC study has said that the rights of Indian women remain restricted in all spheres of life, including social, economic, and political spheres. In a first such study, the National Human Rights Commission has studied the Constitution, various legislation schemes, policies, and they have arrived at a conclusion that there is very unequal representation of women in upper ranks of lawmaking, poor employment among women, and education opportunities. I'm joined by my colleague Charlene Lobo on the broadcast, who will take us through this report. Charlene, thank you for joining us. Well, a lot of people say, where are women bosses? Where are women leaders? What happens to these boardrooms where decisions are essentially taken by men? But this NHRC report aims to answer that. For the benefit of our viewers, could you take us through this study?
That's exactly, what our story is, Archana. It's the 21st century. We talk about women empowerment. We do provide them opportunities, so that they can come to the limelight. But the question is, are we actually talking about opportunities here? How often do we make an environment so friendly for them to make use of those opportunities? Let's quickly take you through what the NHRC report tells us. First and foremost, it does talk about the lopsided data, the lopsided, the unequal representation of men and women that you have at workforces. Few women are in leadership position, fewer women in companies at board level. What that means is that while there are women who are trying to break the glass ceiling, unfortunately, it is that very ceiling that's sort of hindering them to progress. We see very few women in roles of leadership when it comes to multinational companies, whether, when you talk about board meetings, when you talk about board leaders, there are very few women in that position. It also goes on to say that 27.4% of Indian women are in the workforce. Now, look how unequal this data is. You just have 27.4% of women in the workforce, where the rest, over 70% of it, are men. Also going on to say, women hold only 10.33% of Lok Sabha seats. So this not only covers, the business side. This not only covers how the workforce that you have at offices, but it also covers politics, where you had a very small percentage of 10.33 at Lok Sabha. Even when you talk about assembly seats, here in Rajya Sabha, women hold 8.8% of Rajya Sabha seats. So that's 10.3 in Lok Sabha. That's 8.8% of Rajya Sabha. And also talking about state assemblies, in 2021, only 8.5% of women lawmakers were represented in state assemblies. So this talks about the politics side of it. It also goes on to say that continued low representation of women in lawmaking. Another point also talks about how women representing states at global level is very low. So it's again not just one part of it. They have looked at the holistically they're speaking. It's in politics and in the at offices, the representation of women is really low. Even at the global level, we are far behind. Private firms terminate pregnant women to avoid maternity benefits. This is sort of an invisible hurdle where many women at when they're working at offices, if perhaps they do want to go in to start a family or become pregnant, they're sort of discouraged from not hired, or perhaps they're even sort of sacked or terminate. Private firms terminate pregnant women to avoid maternity benefits. So these, by and large, are the loopholes that we need to sort of ensure, we need to sort of address and fix in order to ensure that more women are represented across all walks of life. Back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Charlene, for explaining that to us. I'm joined by a special guest on this broadcast, Jyotika Kalra, who's former member of NHRC, advocate of Supreme Court. And Jyotika is also one of those members of NHRC who penned this report, who wrote this report. Jyotika Kalra, thank you so much, ma'am, for speaking to Mirror Now and making time for this very, very important conversation. It is often asked, where are the women in boardrooms? Why aren't we seeing enough women bosses, enough leaders, whether it's politics, whether it's corporate world, whether it is international representation? And we've seen this report. There are some scathing takeaways. While you were authoring this report, while you were working on this report, what are the reasons why women are not getting enough representation?
I think if I have to say in very few words, and the reason is patriarchy. I mean, because the society by and large considers that male are better, superior than females. That's the reason, when it even comes to the upper echelons of power, as we discussed about the participation of women. I think the data which has been quoted was wrong. In my reports, NHRC report says 14.3% of women in the Lok Sabha. So the Representation of People Act had not seen the light of the day. I think it was in 2008 it was passed in Rajya Sabha, but thereafter again, because what will happen to those all male member of parliaments? No party is prepared that those powerful male members of parliament who are there in their party, they will have to lose if the women have to replace them. So the reason is patriarchy. Similarly, when we talk about the uh, daughters getting right in the property, maternal family's property, the laws are there. The legislation has even given the power to the daughter as a co-pastor. Like by birth, she gets the right, apart from getting the right by way of succession. But we see that most of the wills in this society, in this era, are like being written. The will, I'm saying, last will is being written to deprive the daughters of their right to property. So even if the laws are there, but still that patriarchal mindset, which considers male to be superior and male to capable of discharging all the important roles in the society, that's the reason the women don't get their dues. And our report has suggested, it has dealt with many data, it has dealt with different
Right.
legislation. Yeah.
Right. So now that we know the problem, now that we know that there's an abysmal number of women representation, whether it is global platforms, whether it is politics or corporates, what are the solutions? We are talking about 2022, yet the number is so less. What are the solutions in your view, ma'am, that we can do in order to fix this problem and shatter the glass ceiling?
So look, the commission has also suggested, as far as the upper echelons of powers are concerned, that reservation is also one of the very effective solution to equal representation of women. And in politics, we have seen the reservation for women in the Panchayati Raj and in the local government elections. The reservation was meant for 33% when it started, but now gradually in many states the reservation for women is up to 50%. 50%, I'm 050, and people are really happy with the performance of the women, the punch and the heads in the villages and local bodies. So one of the medium until the women, which represent half the sky, or which is 50% of the total population, but abysmal representation at the important positions of power. So one of the effective mode can be reservation. So that is one thing, because once reservation is there, then there is every likelihood that only women will be competing with the women, and only women will be there before the houses. And such kinds of steps have already been taken, like reserving, even in National Human Rights Commission, one post has been reserved for a woman in 2019 amendment. And like for the independent director, compulsorily one woman should be an independent director. So these kinds of steps in the legislature can be very useful for making or empowering the women and to enabling the women to reach to the upper echelons of powers, because otherwise, men are presumed to be competent and women have to prove their competence. So apart from reservation, as I said, then women also have to invest in their own skills, in their own education, in their own training, and must come out of that phobia that if I leave my house, or if I'll be out of my house, I'll be progressing, or I'll be developing, or I'll be
Right.
doing political life or public life at the cost of my family. The women also need to come out of that, that misconcept that she only is the person who is taking care of the family, and if she is not taking care of the family will be ruined. And I would like to quote Justice Venkat Chalaya when it was IFS officer Muthamma's case, where the Ministry of External Affairs had put a condition on the IFS officer that before they get married, they will have to seek permission from the ministry. And when she challenged that condition in the Supreme Court, Justice Venkat Chalaiya said that if marriage brings responsibility for the women, the marriage also brings responsibility for the men. So that kind of mindset, in the families, that
Right.
family joint responsibility, that would also add or contribute to women, because I was reading a report that India tops is number one in most qualified housewives. I mean, we are heading this universe as far as the most qualified homemakers or housewives are concerned. So that's like all those things together can bring a change. And reservation, I said, and I said that responsibility of the family to be jointly shared. And thirdly, I said the women also has to invest on its skill, on its knowledge, on its training, so that she's capable of performing those important functions.
All right. Thank you so much, Jyotika Kalra, for those very important points and starting that and initiating that very important conversation about boardrooms and biases and women representation, not just in politics, but at global platforms and in other aspects of a society as well. Thank you so much for your time.